General Order 14, issued Stardate 1/9912. Starfleet personnel may intervene in local planetary affairs before to restore general order and to secure the lives and property of Federation citizens only upon receiving direct order to do so from a civilian official with a title or governor or higher. And, that kind of goes hand in hand with General Order 3. Although I think it might General Order 6 as well, but it might conflict with General Order 5 to some degree. I guess it depends. If a Federation governor, planetary governor, or senior world leader is qualified or classified as a Federation representative, whether or not he or she, or it, I guess, can actually commandeer the Starfleet resources, the ship, its crew, other vessels, what have you. But going with the mandates that the Starfleet's job, one of its corner foundation jobs, is defending and protecting the citizenry of the Federation. So if a planet's having a catastrophic event, or maybe a food crisis, or a conflict of what have you that's breaking out, Starfleet can be required and or requested, depending on which general order you want to look at, to come in and preserve order, to act as a military, police, or constabulary force with the intention of restoring general order of a planet. Now, the downside to that could be a tricky thing. If you look at a major planetary system and a long-time member of the Federation, and they have a certain style of planetary government, and the head of said government decides to instigate sweeping changes that maybe, changes the government style and puts that individual in power or enhances that individual's power, and the planetary population rise up and revolt in some degree, or just descend into chaos and riots and what have you, this individual potentially has the clout and the legal backing to require or request or demand that Starfleet step in and restore order. You have to wonder just how far that would go and how sticky that sort of situation would be, and whether or not other Federation specialists and or ambassadors or whatever would have to be brought in, and how far the Starfleet can go and how far they should go. Now, if we're talking ecological distress, pending asteroid strike, massive tsunamis and other natural disasters, well, that's a different animal, right? That's just common sense that the common members of the Federation are going to come to each other's to secure and defense and rescue when in need. We're not talking an outside influence, so we're not talking an invasion by Ferengi or Klingons or something like that, because that's covered under different general orders and are completely different types of issue in relation to General Order number 14. Now, I think sometimes these general orders are vague by design. I imagine what we don't see is among the hundreds of Starfleet regulations, the caveats and limitations and conditions that must be met based off of regulation in order for the Starfleet order, general order, to be, in this case, pursued. Although it's interesting to point out, now I think about this too, something changed from early canon to later canon, from the early TV series to the later TV series, when it came to starship capacity or capabilities. We've seen several incidents, several displays of massive suppression fire fired on a planet. So we know that the Federation starships can alter their phasers to stun settings, even at the capital scale, and that they can be trained upon blocks, buildings, entire continents of a planet. So a handful of Starfleet vessels could, in theory, stun everybody on the planet. Now, is that a great idea? Is that a good idea? I don't know. First, how many people, if you come in and you stun, let's say, an entire continent using your phasers, well, there are not, to my knowledge, planetary shield units devised, unlike Star Wars, where you can build planetary shield generators that have to be overcome before planetary bombardment can begin or suppression fire can begin. In Star Trek, there's no such large-scale shielding systems that we know of. Do large-scale shielding systems exist? Absolutely. Every star base, every orbital facility to some degree, especially space dock, is shielded, just like a starship. Now, is it one massive shield that shields the entire system, the entire unit, or is it a series of overlapping shields? That is implied in starship combat, that it's actually not a single shield generator, but a multiple series of shield generators interlinked. That power can be transferred to the forward shields or the rear shields. The rear shields have lost 50% of their whatever. So you have a lot of options there. Now, that implies that they can build planetary shield generators, and probably very well may have, or at least should. If there's some reason why they can't do it, then, I have not seen it in canon. But I don't know everything there is to know about Star Trek by a minute. So if anybody else has an opinion or information on that, by all means, chime in. I'm always eager to be corrected and or to be educated in additional things. So, I get to use that word an awful lot, don't I? The idea here of massive suppression, of stunning several blocks or half a continent or what have you, you can't do that against an enemy vessel, because if a vessel has its shields up, the stun don't get through. An unshielded ship, theoretically speaking, could be stunned, although there's arguments and debates about the types of hull material and so on and so forth. Also would be, how far does the stun penetrate? Does it penetrate deep into buildings? Does it penetrate underground? If so, how far? So we're talking surface, everybody on the surface, i.e. outdoors, walking the streets, sitting in the parks, would be affected. People who are in the peripherals of the buildings, where they're on the outer edges with windows and balconies and open doorways, potentially would be stunned. People who are in the depths of a building, in the core of the building, much more heavily reinforced buildings, perhaps not so. And we know that individual shielding on the building scale is quite prevalent in Star Trek. We see evidence, and it would make sense. Certain types of structures would just be foolhardy not to have shielding options available to them, between defense structures and structures that are vital for national safety, such as major hospitals, important supply depots, especially ones that are prone to explosive discharges, because in theory a shield generator works both directions, in theory, or can be tuned to work in both directions. Because we see evidence of shielding where we shield off corridors or sections of ships' hulls, so if an escaping so-and-so gets trapped. But we also know that must be either a two-way or a one-way shielding system for ships to be able to fire through their own shields, or their shields are modulated in such a manner that when the weapons are fired, the shield is momentarily disrupted for the fire to get through, or a section of the shield is dropped long enough for the fire to get through. And all that would be highly coordinated, probably computerized coordination, I imagine. The other conundrum would come to me: do we stun an entire block of people or a continent of people? What are the ramifications of that? How many of those people are sitting at vital positions that somebody's monitoring the power core system of the fusion generator, and they're in the middle of an extremely delicate surgery, working on saving somebody's life, transplanting a heart or something like this, and you stun everybody, the patient's likely to die. How many of those people would die? How many young children who are much more susceptible to stun damage because of volume of size become damaged somehow because you've stunned an entire continent? How many of the livestock and other non-sentient beings or entities have suffered because you've stunned an entire continent? If we look at this, is an interesting thing. You don't see a whole lot of mass transport in the TV shows or the movies. There are a few exceptions, but you don't see the ground vehicles, the automobiles, the flying cars. We see a handful of shuttles moving about, for the most part, on places like Earth, I suppose, and on Vulcan, and whether or not Vulcan ever developed mass transportation, mass individual transportation, I don't know. But we know the automobile is huge. We even see remakes in the new introduction of the original TV series from Abrams, where the Calvin timeline version, where a young would-be Captain Kirk, stole his stepdad's Corvette and drives it off the side of a cliff. So it shows that they still exist, but more as a hobby and not about transportation. Because with the advent of teleportation technology and it being quite common, equivalent to the old days of having a phone booth on every other block. Well, you just go down to the nearest teleporter mat and zip to the next location. So if you need to run to the store and it's halfway across the city, we're just going to teleport from point A to point B. They may actually still have some mass transportation, such as monorails, and we see the shuttles. I imagine the shuttles are operating from areas where there are no teleporters, or it's not fiscally sound to have them. Having one out in the middle of nowhere, for example, and you want to go out to visit a great state or a great world park or something like this, having teleporters in the middle, speckled throughout it, might take away from the ambiance or something. Or there might be planetary interferences or man-made interferences that prevent teleportation in certain circumstances. But in the books, in the game, in the early versions of the game, one of the largest, when you talk about cargo, and I have a book on trader captains and something or another, merchant princes or something, and I will eventually get to reviewing it. And as part of the large mass cargoes that you can acquire as a trader, it seems like they're dominated by individual personal transportation of all sorts. You don't see a whole lot of other options in there for transporting, massive quantities of furniture, right? You would think that they would have a little bit bigger range of cargo options, but then they do. I guess that's left up to the GM and the players to determine what mass production, what planet produces what, and transports what to what other place, kind of thing. Maybe there's just they didn't have an answer anyway. So when we look at General Order 14, anybody of governor or higher can request, probably demand, based off of some of the other earlier general orders, that the Federation captain in orbit put a stop to the food riots or the political unrest or whatever that's going on that's disrupting planetary operations and general lives of its citizens. I think this is a very sticky general order. Potential for a lot of abuse, a lot of second guessing come later, and that any captain so-called called into such a situation best do their level best to cover themselves, because it could be twisted and turned on, or they could find themselves suppressing a food riot that was caused by the very people in charge. Till the next time, Get the shields up.